The first thing you learn about small-town services like that is they're never really about the person at the center. They're about who shows up, who doesn't, and who has the audacity to make an entrance. I was standing in the back of St. Mary's, watching my grandmother's casket get lowered while half the town whispered about property values and inheritance, when I heard the purr of an expensive engine outside. Through the stained glass, I caught the gleam of metallic silver, a BMW, maybe an Audi, something that cost more than most people in Millbrook made in 2 years. The whispers stopped. Every head turned toward the church doors. Lora Bennett walked in first, and damn if she didn't look like she owned the place. Designer black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, heels that clicked against the worn wooden floors like a countdown timer. Her blonde hair was pulled back in some elaborate style that screamed, "I have people for this." Behind her came my cousin Trent, all 6'2" of him squeezed into a charcoal suit that fit like it was tailored yesterday, which it probably was. His dark hair was slicked back, and he wore that same smirk he'd had since we were kids, the one that said the world owed him everything and he was just collecting what was his. They found seats in the third row, right behind the Hendersons who'd known Grandma for 40 years. Lora made a show of dabbing her eyes with a tissue, though I'd bet my last dollar she hadn't shed a real tear since she was 12, and her daddy wouldn't buy her a pony. Mrs. Sweeney, my elderly neighbor who'd been Grandma's best friend, shot them a look that could have frozen hell over. She caught my eye and shook her head slightly, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. The service dragged on. Pastor Williams talked about Grandma's kindness, her community spirit, how she'd opened her doors to anyone in need. I thought about the countless Sunday dinners at her table, the way she'd taught me to fix a leaky faucet when I was 8, how she'd slipped me $20 every birthday even when money was tight. When it was over, everyone filed out to the church steps for the usual small-town ritual of catching up and sizing each other up. I was talking to old Mr. Peterson about some work he needed done on his roof when I felt someone approach from behind. Evan Holt. Laura's voice was honey over broken glass. I wasn't sure you'd be here. I turned around slowly, taking my time. She was standing close enough that I could smell her perfume, something French and expensive that probably cost more per ounce than I made in a day. Trent was right behind her, hands in his pockets, looking bored. Wouldn't miss it, I said, keeping my voice level. Grandma meant a lot to me. Of course she did. Laura's smile was sharp as a blade. Family's important, isn't it, Trent? My cousin nodded, but his attention was already wandering to his phone. Absolutely. Sorry for your loss, Evan. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to get uncomfortable. Around us, conversations continued, but I could feel people watching, waiting to see what would happen. Small towns love their drama, especially when it involves people who used to be married. You know, Lora said, adjusting her purse strap with manicured fingers, I heard you're still doing the home inspection thing. That's nice. Steady work, I'm sure. It pays the bills, I replied. I'm sure it does. She glanced around at the modest church, the older cars in the parking lot, the people in their Sunday best that had seen better days. It's just funny how life works out, isn't it? Some people are meant for bigger things, and some people... She shrugged delicately. Well, some people are content with smaller lives. Trent looked up from his phone long enough to smirk. Different strokes, right? I felt the familiar burn of anger in my chest, but I kept it locked down. Instead, I smiled, the kind of calm, unbothered smile that I knew would irritate her more than any argument. You're absolutely right, Lora. Some people are content with what's real. Something flickered in her eyes, but before she could respond, Mrs. Sweeney appeared at my elbow like a tiny, gray-haired guardian angel. Evan, dear, could I have a word? She looked pointedly at Lora and Trent. Privately? Of course. I nodded to my ex-wife and cousin. Enjoy the rest of your visit. Mrs. Sweeney led me away from the crowd, toward the small garden behind the church where Grandma used to tend the roses. Once we were out of earshot, she reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a manila folder. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you," she said, pressing it into my hands. "She said you'd know what to do with it when the time was right." I opened the folder. Inside were photocopied documents, bank statements, loan applications, property records, all bearing Trent's name and signature. My pulse quickened as I scanned the numbers. Unpaid loans, overdue payments, assets listed that I knew for a fact he didn't own. "Where did she get these?" I asked. Mrs. Sweeney's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Your grandmother had friends in many places, dear, including the county clerk's office and the bank where that boy of yours applied for his loans." I looked back toward the church steps, where Lora was holding court with a group of women, probably telling them about her latest real estate conquests. Trent was on his phone again, pacing near their expensive car. "Seems I picked right," I heard Lora say, her voice carrying on the afternoon air. "You're still struggling." I closed the folder and smiled. A real smile this time. "Mrs. Sweeney," I said, "I think it's time I started paying more attention to family business." The last stop wasn't the kind of bar that appeared in travel guides or won awards for ambiance. It was a dive in the truest sense, dim lighting, sticky floors, and a clientele that valued cheap beer over craft cocktails, which made it perfect for the kind of conversation I needed to have. Grady O'Brien was already there when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth near the back. At 52, he looked like Central Casting's idea of an ex-cop. Thick gray mustache, weathered face, and hands that had seen their share of fights. He'd been my best friend since high school, the kind of guy who'd help you move a body without asking questions, though hopefully it would never come to that. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. "Something like that." I signaled the bartender for a beer and spread the contents of Mrs. Sweeney's folder across the scarred wooden table. Grady's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. "Where'd you get this?" "Grandma's final gift." I took a long pull of beer when it arrived. "Looks like Cousin Trent's been living beyond his means." "Way beyond." Grady picked up a loan application dated 6 months ago. "He listed your grandmother's house as collateral, the one she still owned?" "Among other things." I pointed to another document. "See this property in Portland? It's been in foreclosure for 2 years. And this business account? Overdrawn by $40,000. "Jesus!" Grady leaned back in the booth. "What's his game?" "Near as I can figure, he's been using fake assets to secure loans, then using those loans to fund his lifestyle. Classic Ponzi scheme, just on a smaller scale." "And Lora?" I thought about my ex-wife's designer clothes, her perfect manicure, the way she'd looked at me today like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. I doubt she knows the details, but she's definitely enjoying the benefits. Grady was quiet for a moment, studying the papers. "So, what's the plan?" "Information gathering for now." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact. "Anna Reeves. Remember her? She's a lawyer now. Specializes in financial crimes. The redhead from high school? The one who used to tear apart our English teacher's assignments? That's the one." I hit the call button. If anyone can help me understand the legal implications of this mess, it's her. Anna answered on the third ring. "Evan Holt. I heard about your grandmother. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thanks. Listen, I need a favor. Professional consultation. Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Of course. What's this about?" I glanced at Grady, who was photographing the documents with his phone. "Let's just say I've stumbled across some interesting financial irregularities involving a family member." "Ah." There was a knowing tone in her voice. "The kind of irregularities that might interest certain regulatory agencies?" "Possibly." "My office, 10 a.m., and Evan? Bring copies of everything." After I hung up, Grady slid the papers back across the table. You know, there might be another angle here. What do you mean? Lora works in real estate, right? High-end stuff? Luxury properties? Yeah. Why? Well, if Trent's been inflating his assets to get loans, and Lora's been helping him look successful. Grady's grin was predatory. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. Both their licenses could be at risk. I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. Keep talking. Think about it. Lora's whole identity is wrapped up in being successful, being seen as someone who made it big. Take away her real estate license, her income, her reputation. He shrugged. What's she got left? A lying cousin with a mountain of debt. Exactly. We spent the next hour going through the documents more carefully, cross-referencing dates and amounts. The picture that emerged was of a man desperately trying to maintain an image he couldn't afford, borrowing against assets he didn't own to fund a lifestyle built on lies. By the time we left the bar, I had a plan. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would land me in jail. Just a careful application of pressure in all the right places. The next morning, I met Anna at her law office downtown. She'd done well for herself, corner office, leather furniture, diplomas and awards covering one wall. She was still the sharp-eyed, no-nonsense woman I remembered from high school, but now she wore expensive suits and commanded respect in courtrooms across the state. "This is impressive work," she said, after reviewing the documents. "Whoever compiled this knew exactly what to look for." My grandmother was a smart woman, smart and thorough. Anna leaned back in her chair. "The question is, what do you want to do with this information? What are my options?" "Well, you could report it to the State Banking Commission, the Attorney General's office, maybe the IRS. But that would take months, maybe years to resolve." She tapped her pen against the desk. Or, you could share this information with the right people in the private sector. Trent's business partners, for instance. His lenders. People who have a more immediate interest in getting answers. I thought about Lora's smug smile. The way she'd look down at me and everyone else at the funeral. How long would that take? Days, maybe weeks. Financial institutions don't like being lied to, and they move fast when they smell fraud. "Do it," Anna smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." That afternoon, I drove out to Grandma's house. It sat on 5 acres of rolling hills about 10 minutes outside town, a 2-story farmhouse with good bones and a view that went on forever. Lora had always hated it. Too isolated, too old-fashioned, not prestigious enough for her tastes. But I'd loved it since I was a kid. Summers spent helping Grandma in her garden, learning to use tools in the old barn, sitting on the front porch watching thunderstorms roll across the valley. It was the kind of place where you could think, where you could build something real. I walked through the empty rooms, making mental notes about what needed to be done. New wiring in the kitchen, fresh paint throughout, refinishing the hardwood floors. It would take months of work, but I had the skills and the time. More importantly, I had the motivation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you were asking questions about family business. Mind your own. T." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. If Trent thought a vague threat would scare me off, he was about to learn how wrong he could be. I called the real estate attorney handling Grandma's estate and made an offer on the house. A sealed bid, just like she'd specified in her will. Whatever Trent was planning, he was too late. By evening, I was back at the last stop, updating Grady on the day's progress. "So Anna's reaching out to the lenders?" he asked. "Should happen tomorrow. Anonymous tip about potential fraud in loan applications." "And the house?" "Bid submitted. We'll know in 48 hours. Grady raised his beer in a mock toast. "To family reunions." "To family reunions," I agreed. As I drove home that night, I passed Trent's house, a modern monstrosity on the good side of town, all glass and steel angles that screamed money. Lora's BMW was in the circular driveway, along with Trent's Porsche. I wondered how long it would be before they had to sell them. The call came at 7:30 in the morning, 3 days after my meeting with Anna. I was having coffee and reading the paper when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Holt? This is David Chen from Millbrook First National. I understand you're related to Trent Hale? I set down my coffee cup carefully. He's my cousin. Why? We need to verify some information on a loan application. Mr. Hale listed you as a reference for a property at 247 Maple Ridge Road. Could you confirm your relationship to that property? 247. Maple Ridge Road was Grandma's house, the house Trent had apparently used as collateral for a loan he had no right to take. I'm not sure what my cousin told you, I said slowly, but I don't have any ownership interest in that property. Neither does he, for that matter. There was a pause. Could you repeat that, please? My cousin Trent Hale has no legal claim to 247 Maple Ridge Road. The property belongs to my grandmother's estate, and I'm the sole beneficiary. I see. The banker's voice had gone cold and professional. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Holt. We'll be in touch. After he hung up, I sat back in my kitchen chair and smiled. Anna worked fast. The next call came an hour later, this time from someone at Trent's investment firm. Then another from a different bank. By noon, I'd fielded 6 calls from various financial institutions, all asking variations of the same questions about properties and assets that Trent had claimed to own. I answered them all honestly and completely. Around 2 o'clock, Grady called. You need to get down to Main Street. Now. What's going on? Just get down here. Trust me, you'll want to see this. I found him standing across from Lora's real estate office, pretending to read a newspaper. Through the large front windows, I could see animated conversation happening inside. Lora was gesturing wildly at a man in a suit, her face flushed with anger or panic. Maybe both. That's her broker, Grady said quietly. Showed up about 20 minutes ago with a briefcase and a very serious expression. As we watched, the man handed Lora a manila envelope. She tore it open, read whatever was inside, and went pale. Then she started shouting. We couldn't hear the words through the glass, but her body language said everything. Think that's about the inquiry into her business practices? I asked. Would be my guess. Grady folded his newspaper. Anna really doesn't mess around, does she? Never has. The man in the suit left a few minutes later, walking past us without a glance. Through the window, we could see Lora slumped in her chair, staring at the papers in her hands. Almost feel sorry for her, Grady said. Almost. I don't. That evening, I was working in my garage when a car pulled into my driveway. I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding to see Trent climbing out of his Porsche. He looked like hell. Wrinkled shirt, 5 o'clock shadow, the kind of manic energy that comes from too much caffeine and too little sleep. We need to talk, he said, without preamble. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and leaned against my workbench. About what? You know damn well about what. He ran his hands through his hair. The banks, the questions, the sudden interest in my business affairs. I'm not sure what you're getting at. Cut the shit, Evan. His voice was rising. I know you're behind this. What did you tell them? The truth. I kept my voice calm and level. When they asked about properties you'd claimed to own, I told them you didn't own them. That was private information. No, Trent, that was fraud. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what you're messing with here. I've got investors, obligations. You've got lies and stolen collateral. I straightened up, and he stopped advancing. I had 4 inches and 30 pounds on him, and we both knew it. How much did you take them for? 100,000? More? This isn't over. You're right, I said. It's not. He glared at me for another moment, then stormed back to his car. The Porsche's engine roared to life, and he peeled out of my driveway fast enough to leave rubber on the asphalt. I went back to work on the engine, humming quietly to myself. The next morning brought news that made the whole thing worthwhile. Anna called to tell me that the estate attorney had accepted my bid on Grandma's house. "Congratulations," she said. "You're now the proud owner of 5 acres of prime real estate." "What about other bids?" "There was only one other. Came in yesterday, about 12 hours too late." I didn't have to ask who'd submitted it. That afternoon, I drove out to the house with a truck full of tools and supplies. I had 2 weeks of vacation saved up, and I planned to spend every day working on the place. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, refinished floors. By the time I was done, it would be the kind of home Grandma had always dreamed of. I was unloading lumber when another car pulled up. This time it was Lora driving alone. She got out slowly, like she was walking to her own execution. "Evan." "Lora." I kept working, carrying boards toward the front porch. "I heard about the house. Did you?" "We need to talk." I set down the lumber and looked at her. Up close, she looked as bad as Trent had the night before. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "About what?" "About this." She gestured vaguely at the house, at me, at the situation in general. "About whatever game you're playing." "I'm not playing any game, Lora. I'm just living my life." "Bullshit." The word came out sharp and bitter. "You've been making calls, asking questions, stirring up trouble." "I've been answering questions. There's a difference." She stared at me for a long moment. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "I want to fix up my grandmother's house. I want to do honest work for honest pay. I want to live in a place where people don't look down on me for having dirt under my fingernails." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." "Then maybe you should be more specific." "How much will it take for you to back off, to stop whatever you're doing to Trent's business?" I stared at her, genuinely amazed. "You think this is about money?" "Everything's about money, Evan. You taught me that." "No," I said quietly. "You taught yourself that. I just wasn't rich enough to matter." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I picked up another board, hefting its weight. "You want to talk about fair? You left me for my cousin because he had money. You spent 3 years sending me pictures of vacations I couldn't afford and clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. You showed up at my grandmother's funeral to gloat about how much better your life turned out. I never— And now," I continued, my voice still calm but with steel underneath, "now that your golden boy turns out to be a fraud and a liar, you want to pay me to pretend I never noticed. Trent made some mistakes. Trent committed crimes. Multiple felonies, if Anna's right about the scope of it." I started walking toward the house. "And you helped him." "I didn't know." I stopped and turned back to her. "Didn't you? All those expensive dinners, the trips to Europe, the designer clothes, where did you think the money was coming from?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. "You knew," I said. "Maybe not the details, but you knew something wasn't right. You just didn't care as long as you got your share." "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now you deal with the consequences." I picked up my tools and headed for the front door. "And Lora? Don't come back here. This is my home now." I went inside and closed the door behind me, leaving her standing in the driveway next to her expensive car and her expensive problems. Through the window, I watched her sit there for almost 10 minutes before finally driving away. 2 weeks later, I was putting the finishing touches on the kitchen cabinets when Mrs. Sweeney knocked on the front door. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing the kind of smile that meant she had gossip to share. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, bustling into the kitchen, "and I thought you might want to hear about the excitement in town." I accepted the casserole gratefully. I'd been living on takeout and whatever I could heat up in the microwave. "What kind of excitement?" Well, she settled into one of the kitchen chairs with obvious relish. It seems your cousin's business has hit a rough patch. Has it? Oh, yes. Police were at his office yesterday carrying out boxes of files, something about financial irregularities. She paused dramatically. And Lora's real estate license has been suspended pending investigation. I tried to look surprised. Really? Really. Apparently there are questions about whether she properly disclosed conflicts of interest in some of her transactions, particularly ones involving family members. I thought about Trent's house, the one Lora had probably helped him buy with money that wasn't really his. That's unfortunate. Isn't it? Mrs. Sweeney's eyes twinkled. Of course, these things have a way of working themselves out. Truth has a way of coming to light. After she left, I called Anna for an update. It's moving faster than I expected, she said. The Banking Commission opened a formal investigation yesterday. 3 different institutions have filed complaints about fraudulent loan applications. What's that mean for Trent? Criminal charges, most likely. The amounts involved push it into felony territory. She paused. And Evan? They're looking at Lora, too. Apparently she co-signed some of the loan documents. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. How long before charges are filed? Weeks, maybe a month. These things take time, but the evidence is pretty overwhelming. That evening, I was sitting on the front porch of my newly renovated house, drinking a beer and watching the sunset, when a convoy of cars came up the driveway. Trent's Porsche led the way, followed by Lora's BMW and a Mercedes I didn't recognize. They parked in a line and got out like some kind of dysfunctional delegation. Trent looked like he hadn't slept in days. Lora was trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The Mercedes belonged to a woman I recognized as Lora's mother. Old money, older attitudes, and the kind of entitlement that came from never having to work for anything. Evan, Trent said as they approached the porch. We need to talk. Seems to be a popular sentiment lately. I didn't get up from my chair. What can I do for you? You can stop this vendetta before it destroys everyone involved. Vendetta? I took a sip of beer. That's an interesting word choice. Lora's mother stepped forward. Margaret Bennett was 65 and looked like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Perfectly styled silver hair, pearls, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. Young man, she said in the tone she probably used on servants, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Trent has made some errors in judgment, but surely we can resolve this without involving the authorities. What kind of resolution did you have in mind? She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. What would it take to make this go away? I stared at her for a moment, then started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but deep, genuine laughter that made all 3 of them shift uncomfortably. You think you can buy me off, I said when I finally caught my breath. You actually think this is about money? Everything is about money, Margaret said primly. Name your price. My price? I stood up, setting my beer on the porch railing. My price is watching your daughter learn what it's like to lose everything because of someone else's greed. My price is seeing Trent face the consequences of his lies. My price is justice. You're being unreasonable, Lora said. We can work something out. No, I said firmly. We can't. You made your choices, both of you. You chose money over honesty, status over integrity, appearance over reality. Now, you get to live with the consequences. Trent stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than us? I think I'm more honest than you. Honest? He laughed bitterly. You're a small-town handyman who never amounted to anything. Lora saw that and she made the smart choice. Did she? I gestured at the house behind me, at the land stretching out in all directions. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she chose a fraud over someone who actually built something real. This is pointless, Margaret said. Trent, we're leaving. But Trent wasn't done. "You want to know the truth, Evan? Lora never loved you. She told me so herself. You were just a placeholder until something better came along." I looked at Lora, who had gone pale. "Is that true?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. "Well," I said quietly, "I guess that makes us even. Because I stopped loving her the day she walked out." The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. "Get off my property," I said finally. "All of you. And don't come back." They left without another word, their expensive cars disappearing down the driveway in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. I sat back down and picked up my beer. The sunset was still beautiful, the air still clean, and the house still mine. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in town getting supplies when I saw the police cars outside Trent's office building. By noon, the story was all over social media. Local businessman arrested on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Lora was arrested the same afternoon at her office. The photos in the local paper showed her being led away in handcuffs, her perfect composure finally cracking. I felt no satisfaction in seeing those images, just a quiet sense that the universe had finally balanced its books. Anna called that evening with the details. Trent's looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. Lora might get less if she cooperates, but her real estate career is finished. What about restitution? They'll have to liquidate everything. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, assuming there's anything left in them. I thought about Lora's BMW, Trent's Porsche, the glass house that had impressed everyone in town, all of it built on lies and stolen money. "There's something else," Anna said. "The prosecutor wants to talk to you." "About what?" "You're not in any trouble. They just want to understand the timeline, how you came to have the information about the fraudulent loans." I met with the prosecutor the next day. Sarah Williams was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd built a reputation for taking down white-collar criminals. She listened carefully as I explained about Grandma's folder, the phone calls from confused bankers, my decision to tell the truth about Trent's false claims. "You understand that your cooperation was instrumental in building this case," she said when I finished. "I just answered questions honestly. Sometimes that's all it takes." She leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Holt, did you know that your ex-wife and cousin had been running this scheme for almost 2 years?" I shook my head. I suspected something was off, but not the scope of it. They used fraudulent documents to secure over $300,000 in loans, money that funded vacations, luxury purchases, investments that never existed. She pulled out a file thick with papers. "Your ex-wife was more involved than we initially thought. She helped create fake property valuations, forged documents, even set up shell companies to hide assets. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but it did." "How much of it can you recover?" "Some, but a lot of it's gone, spent on things that can't be recovered. Trips, dinners, clothes, cars that have depreciated." She shrugged. "The victims will be lucky to get 30 cents on the dollar." I thought about the banks, the investors, the ordinary people whose money had funded Lora and Trent's fantasy lifestyle. "What happens now?" "Trial, assuming they don't take plea deals. Your testimony will be important if it goes that far. I'll be there." The trials were scheduled for the following spring, but neither Trent nor Lora made it that far. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of lengthy prison sentences, both accepted plea agreements. Trent got 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution, a debt that would follow him for the rest of his life. Lora got 18 months and community service, but her real estate license was permanently revoked. I watched from the back of the courtroom as they were sentenced. Lora cried as the judge read her sentence. Trent just stared straight ahead, his face blank. Neither of them looked at me. Afterward, I drove back to Grandma's house, my house now. I'd finished most of the renovations, and it looked better than it had in decades. The kitchen gleamed with new appliances and fresh paint. The hardwood floors were restored to their original luster. The front porch had been rebuilt with a view of the valley that took your breath away. I was sitting on that porch when Mrs. Sweeney came by with another casserole and the latest gossip. "Heard about the sentencing," she said, settling into the rocking chair I'd bought for her visits. "Shame how it all turned out." "Is it?" She gave me a sharp look. "Don't you feel sorry for them at all?" I thought about that for a moment. I feel sorry for the people they hurt. The banks, the investors, the victims who'll never get their money back. I paused. But Lora and Trent, they made their choices. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said quietly. "Think so?" "Oh, I know so." She smiled. "She always said you were the one with real character. Said you'd weather any storm and come out stronger." As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, I thought about the last few months, about justice and consequences, about the difference between what's real and what's just for show. Lora had been right about one thing. She had picked right, at least from her perspective. She'd chosen wealth over character, appearance over substance, easy money over honest work, and in the end, it had cost her everything. I raised my beer in a silent toast to Grandma, wherever she was. She'd given me more than just a house and some documents. She'd given me the chance to prove that sometimes the truth really does win. The screen door creaked as Mrs. Sweeney went inside to put away the casserole. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in the front yard. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley. I sat there until full dark, listening to the sounds of home. 6 months later, I was putting the final coat of paint on the front porch when a car I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. It was an older Honda, dented and clearly well used. The woman who got out looked familiar, but it took me a moment to place her. Lora, but a different Lora than the one who'd shown up at Grandma's funeral. Her hair was shorter, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, and she moved with the careful hesitancy of someone who wasn't sure of their welcome. "Hello, Evan." I set down my paintbrush and wiped my hands on a rag. "Lora, I heard you finished the renovations. The house looks beautiful." "Thank you." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. She looked older, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. Prison had changed her, stripped away the polished veneer I'd known for so long. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said finally. I wanted to apologize." "For what, specifically?" "For all of it. For leaving the way I did. For the things I said at the funeral. For getting involved with Trent's schemes." She took a shaky breath. "For never appreciating what we had." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was exhaustion and what might have been genuine regret. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "My mother's for now, until I can get back on my feet." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out when you're a convicted felon, job opportunities are limited." "What about Trent?" "Still in prison, won't be out for another 2 years." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I haven't spoken to him since the sentencing." I picked up my paintbrush again, not because I needed to keep working, but because I needed something to do with my hands. "Why are you really here, Lora?" "I wanted to see what I gave up." She gestured at the house, the land, the view. "I wanted to understand what I was too stupid to value when I had it." "And do you? Understand, I mean?" "I think so." She was quiet for a moment. "You know what the worst part of prison was? Not the bars or the guards or the terrible food. It was having time to think about all the choices I'd made, all the people I'd hurt. Including yourself. Especially myself." She looked at me directly for the first time since arriving. I threw away something real for something that was all surface. I chose money over love, status over substance. And in the end, I lost everything anyway. I finished the section of railing I was working on before responding. What do you want from me, Lora? Forgiveness? Absolution? I don't know. Her voice was small. Maybe I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Do you? I lost the only man who ever loved me for who I really was, not for what I could do for him, or how I made him look. Tears were running down her cheeks now. I lost my chance at a real life, a real home, real happiness. I set down the paintbrush and really looked at her. The woman standing in my driveway bore little resemblance to the polished, arrogant person who'd mocked me at the funeral. Prison had stripped away her pretenses, forced her to confront the reality of who she'd become. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I'm so sorry. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of anger I'd carried for so long it had become part of me. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like understanding. I know you are, I said quietly. Is there any chance? She started, then stopped. No, never mind. I don't have the right to ask. Ask what? If there's any chance you could ever forgive me. Not take me back, I know that's impossible, but maybe someday you could forgive me. I thought about Grandma, about the lessons she'd taught me about grace and second chances, about the difference between justice and revenge, between consequences and cruelty. Maybe, I said finally. Someday. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Probably. She started to turn away, then stopped. Evan, for what it's worth, I really did love you. I was just too selfish and stupid to know how to show it. I know, I said. I loved you too. Past tense? I looked at the house behind me, at the life I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. Past tense. She nodded again, accepting the finality of it. Take care of yourself, Evan. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Lora, when you figure out who you really are. I watched her drive away in her dented Honda, disappearing down the road like a ghost from a life I used to live. Then I picked up my paintbrush and went back to work. Mrs. Sweeney appeared at my elbow a few minutes later, as if she'd been waiting for Lora to leave. That was gracious of you, she said. Was it? Mercy is always gracious, dear, even when it's not deserved. Grandma teach you that? Among other things. She smiled. She also taught me that the best revenge is living well. I looked around at my restored house, my peaceful land, my quiet life built on honest work and real relationships. Think I'm managing that? Oh yes, she said. I think you're managing that just fine. That evening, I sat on the front porch watching another sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The house was finished, the past was finally put to rest, and the future stretched out ahead of me like an open road. Somewhere in the distance, that same train whistle echoed across the valley, but this time it sounded like a promise rather than a lament. I raised my beer in a final toast, to Grandma, to justice, to the long road that had led me home. Then I sat back in my chair and watched the stars come out, one by one, in the clear Maine sky. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or hurt or looking for revenge. I was just a man who'd learned the difference between what's real